Hi, welcome. Enjoy the content, subscribe, and turn on notifications.
Jason had always been an observant man. Quiet, but attentive. The type who doesn't like to make a fuss but notices everything down to the subtlest details. And that's exactly how it all started, tiny, almost imperceptible changes that piled up until they became too big to ignore. Amanda began spending more time in the shower. She started leaving her phone face down on the table. She'd laugh to herself while looking at the screen, and when he asked why, she'd say, "Nothing, just silly stuff." In the first few days, Jason believed her. He wanted to believe her. It was easier to think she was just stressed out at work, that this was only a phase. Every marriage has its phases, right? But something inside him started to nag. Like the silence between them wasn't just a lack of conversation, but a sign of someone slowly withdrawing. She stopped asking him questions. She stopped caring about his day. When he told her about a work problem, she'd just nod her head as if she was only half listening. She always seemed in a hurry, even at home. And the touch, that affectionate touch that used to happen for no reason, the light hand on his back in the kitchen, the kiss on his forehead when they passed each other in the hallway, vanished without explanation. One night, Jason made dinner. A simple gesture, but done lovingly. He chose her favorite pasta, opened the wine they were saving for special occasions, tried to create a warm mood. Amanda arrived, greeted him with a quick kiss on the cheek and, not even acknowledging his effort, just said she was too tired to eat. She went upstairs, took off her shoes in the middle of the living room, and went straight to the bedroom, leaving Jason at the table set for two, with untouched glasses of wine and a tight feeling in his chest that he pretended not to notice. For the first time, he thought something really serious might be going on. Life went on, but it felt forced. Like a piece was out of place. Jason tried fooling himself for a few more weeks. He kept busy with work, the podcasts he listened to in the car, even silly TV series before bed. But it was impossible not to notice the disconnect. They shared the same roof but seemed to live in different worlds. That's when he started testing things. Quietly, he'd say he was working late, then come home early to see her reaction. Sometimes, Amanda would be on the phone and immediately hang up when she heard the door. Other times, she wouldn't even realize he'd arrived. Her phone, once left on the table or couch, was now always with her, even in the bathroom. And whenever he approached from behind to hug her, like he always had, she'd tense up for a moment. These were tiny details, but Jason was always good at putting pieces together. He remembered old conversations. Amanda had mentioned she found his steady way of handling everything boring. She said predictability killed desire. He'd thought it was just a passing complaint, but those words now echoed strongly. Maybe she was looking for exactly what he didn't provide, something new, exciting, someone who'd break the routine. He'd always believed security and loyalty were enough to keep a relationship going. And maybe they were, just from one person's point of view. Jason wondered if he should confront her. He thought about sitting down to tell her everything he was feeling, but something held him back. A mix of fear and pride. Fear of hearing the truth in her own words, pride that wouldn't let him seem weak. So he decided to keep watching. And as he did, the distance grew. It was like living with a stranger. The woman he knew, someone he traveled with, laughed with, planned his future with, now seemed to have her thoughts somewhere else. Like she had a secret life hidden too well. Every new gesture, every offhand remark, every random laugh fed the certainty he didn't want to admit. Something had changed, and he wasn't the cause. Amanda smiled more at her phone than at him. She slept turned away from him, always busy, always with some last-minute commitment. Even the few conversations they had were cold, and that hurt more than any fight could. It was a silent, cutting lack of interest. One night, while Amanda was showering and had left her laptop unlocked on the living room table, Jason acted on an impulse he couldn't explain. He sat down, hesitated a second, then opened her browser history. His heart pounded. Among searches for recipes and fashion sites, there it was, a very clear address, impossible to overlook, a dating site for people seeking affairs. He clicked. The page was still logged in. Username, SophieHeart87. Jason froze, staring at the screen, feeling the ground drop out from under him. It was the confirmation he'd been desperately hoping not to find. He stared at the username like those letters had the power to rewrite his entire marriage. SophieHeart87. It was strange how something so small, a username, could carry so much destruction. He knew what it meant, but seeing it himself felt different. The account was active, updated. Recent messages, photos, likes. All of it had a confidence he never imagined Amanda could show another man. There was no hesitation, just desire and excitement. She chatted with strangers with zero guilt. That was what hurt the most. Jason spent that entire night barely sleeping, torn between confronting her right then and needing to see how far it all went. Deep down, part of him still wanted to believe it might just be a phase, some random curiosity. But the account was there, active, and what he saw made it obvious this wasn't just a playful online fling. It was something cultivated. And, above all, carefully hidden. The next day, he decided to act. He created a fake profile. Picked a simple, believable name, Mark. Used stock images of a face attractive enough to catch interest but subtle enough to seem trustworthy. He filled everything out as though he were a lonely, bored man looking for a connection outside his marriage. Ironically, that profile, created in minutes, was exactly the type of man Amanda hinted she wanted whenever they talked about anything personal. The profile got approved fast. Within a few hours, Mark had his first message. A woman named Sophie, with an elegant profile picture, a provocative description, and a direct style. Her opening line was something Jason had never heard from Amanda: "You seem like exactly what I'm looking for. I'm not here because I'm lonely, I'm here because I want to be." It felt like a punch. Jason reread it to be sure. Same name, same vibe. But he needed to confirm. The days that followed were filled with a mix of pain and strategy. Jason stayed flirty, attentive, interested. Sophie replied eagerly. Each new message made it more obvious that she was willing to reveal everything, how she felt, what she wanted, what she'd already done. Little by little, the puzzle came together. The expressions, the times she was online, her word choices, all pointed to Amanda. Then the photo came. Her face was hidden, but her body was unmistakable. That side tattoo, something Jason was intimately familiar with, was right there, blatantly confirming her betrayal. Jason's stomach turned. Still, he kept up the act. He had to know more. He wanted to hear, or rather read, what was going on in her head. And it was worse than any guess he'd made. Amanda talked about Jason like he was a drag. A man lacking energy, predictable, nearly invisible in his own home. She said she deserved more, that she was tired of living a normal life, and that Mark was just the right guy to pull her out of her rut. She called her husband weak, like she was talking about a stranger. Jason read every word with his heart in pieces, but kept going. He needed proof, needed to see how deep that gap went. The conversation escalated quickly. Sophie was bold, confident, determined. She talked about past hookups and the risks she'd taken, like it was all just thrilling instead of destructive. Jason saved everything: screenshots, text logs, audio recordings. He knew eventually he'd have to face the truth head-on, but for now, he was committed to uncovering it completely. One of the hardest moments was when she went into detail about going out with someone else after pretending to be on a business trip. Jason never suspected a thing. While she described the dinner, the hotel, the gestures, he remembered staying home alone that night, watching TV, thinking she was exhausted from a conference. It was like watching his own life disintegrate from the inside, caused by a woman he still loved even though he didn't recognize her anymore. With each new conversation, Jason stopped seeing Amanda as the wife he knew and started seeing Sophie, a version of her he never imagined could exist. Seductive, cold, manipulative. Even though she seemed fun, she had a chilling disregard for everything they'd built. That cut deeper than any physical betrayal could. It was like their marriage had been a play, and he was the only one who believed in the script. For days, Jason kept the profile going. He'd flirt, keep her hooked, pretend to be the man she wanted. And Amanda, more wrapped up in it all, gave away more details every day. It was as if she was venting with relief, never realizing that the stranger she was talking to was her own husband. A husband who was shattered inside but still focused on learning the whole truth. Eventually, Amanda, feeling confident and excited, suggested something Jason had been expecting, though it still made his chest tighten. She wanted to meet in person. A quiet dinner, somewhere discreet. The start of something that, according to her, could be more than just an affair. Jason took a deep breath. The trap was set. He knew everything would change from there. It wasn't just suspicion anymore, it was proof. It was time to confront the woman he thought he knew with the reality she'd built behind his back. Jason already had enough to end that marriage with a single conversation. But part of him needed more than just to know. He had to see it. He had to put Amanda face to face with the truth she herself had created, not realizing she was being watched the whole time. It went beyond getting answers, it felt like a need for justice. While he was devoting himself to a relationship he believed in, she was out there living a separate story as if everything they built together could be tossed aside without regret. Over breakfast, keeping a neutral tone like he was mentioning something routine, Jason looked at Amanda and said he had to travel for work. He mentioned an urgent client meeting in another city that had come up last minute, and that he'd be gone for 2 days. Amanda gave a brief look of surprise, raising her eyebrows, muttering, "Really?" while stirring her coffee. He nodded, said he'd booked a hotel, and would leave after lunch. Amanda simply told him to be careful on the road and went back to her phone, like his absence was just another convenient moment for her. So when Amanda, Sophie, brought up meeting in person, Jason knew exactly what he had to do. She didn't want a restaurant, a hotel, or anywhere public. She wanted something more private, more daring. She said her husband would be away, the house would be empty, and it was the perfect time for their first meeting. Jason, forcing himself not to back out, answered as Mark, pretending to be thrilled. Inside, he was fighting the urge to call it all off. But he couldn't stop. This was the final step. He packed a small bag, threw in a few clothes just to support his story. She seemed almost relieved that he was leaving. For the first time in years, Jason noticed a slight smile on his wife's face at the thought of him being gone. He drove his own car a few blocks, parked at a grocery store, then texted Amanda as Mark, confirming that everything was set for that night. She replied within minutes, using emojis and teasing lines that might flatter someone else. For Jason, each word was like a hit to the gut. Later, he rented another car downtown, a dark sedan, nothing like his usual one, no stickers or features that might give him away. He spent hours driving around, mentally rehearsing what he'd say, how he'd act, what he'd do in that moment. He was scared he might lose control, start shouting, start shaking. But most of all, he was determined to show her he wasn't clueless. That night, parked 2 blocks from his own house, Jason switched off the headlights. He watched the street. It was all familiar, but now felt like a foreign land. The same sidewalk, the same porch, the same gate, but everything took on a heavier meaning. Their home was now a stage, a place where she intended to betray her husband, thinking he was too far away to suspect a thing. Just minutes before the agreed time, Jason grabbed his phone, opened the app, and calmly typed, "I'm here." Then he pulled up in front of his own house in the rental car. His heart was racing, but his hands were steady. Amanda's reply came almost right away, "The door's unlocked." Come in quick so the neighbors don't notice. Jason took a deep breath. His face gave nothing away. But inside, something had snapped once and for all. He stayed in the car for a few seconds after reading Amanda's message. The doors unlocked. Come in quick so the neighbors don't notice. It felt like a verdict. He got out quietly, looking at his own home as if he were a stranger about to enter unknown territory. Same facade, same porch where they'd once laughed together, but it all felt like a hollow set now. Each step toward the door brought up memories, birthdays, future plans, hugs on rough days. All of it seemed distant, like it belonged to different people. He pushed the door open gently. It was slightly ajar, just like she promised. Soft music drifted from the living room, the kind of romantic soundtrack that, under other circumstances, might be touching. But now it was only another piece of Amanda's script, written under the assumption her husband was miles away. Jason walked in quietly, keeping his breathing steady. He scanned the room for her. Then he saw her. She stood facing a mirror, fixing her hair. She wore an outfit he'd never seen, something too provocative to be casual. She'd clearly dressed for someone special. Jason paused, feeling time stretch as he watched every move. The way she placed her hands on her neck, adjusted her neckline, smiled subtly at her reflection. It was a side of her he'd never known, the side that happily got ready to welcome a lover into the home she shared with her husband. He felt his chest tighten but held on to his composure. In that moment, he needed to stay focused, because what came next required complete control. Amanda turned slowly, still smiling, but the smile vanished when her eyes met his. She froze, her lips parted as if her voice had been taken away. Her face turned pale in an instant. Jason stood there, unmoving, looking straight at her, not saying a word. The silence between them grew suffocating. He didn't yell, didn't ask why. He took a step forward, pulled out his phone, and set it on the table by her side. The screen was already lit. There, message after message, were all the chats between Amanda and Mark. The photos, the voice recordings, the words. Every confession she'd typed eagerly was right there, visible to the one person who should never have seen them. Amanda stepped back, unable to look away from the proof. Then, like she wanted to undo a nightmare, she started throwing out explanations. The words were jumbled, shaky. She said it was just a game, that she never intended for it to go anywhere, that she was lonely, curious, that it was a weak moment. Jason listened quietly. His eyes stayed on her face, expressionless, like he was hearing a story that came too late. Amanda reached out, tried to touch his arm, but he moved back. He took a black folder from the bag he'd left on the couch. Inside were the divorce papers, already prepared. He took them out and handed them to her in silence. She hesitated, then took them, still in shock. Jason glanced around the house, almost like he was saying goodbye to something that no longer mattered. He walked to the door, opened it, and before leaving, looked back at her one last time. His eyes were calm, with no anger or rush. And before she could say anything more, he left. He walked out without slamming the door or causing a scene, certain that this chapter had ended, on his terms. While Amanda stood there, divorce papers in hand, phone on the table, a question stuck in her throat that would never be answered, Jason headed to his car with steady steps. He had already cried all he needed to before showing up. Now it was time to begin again, something real, even if it started with the silence of loss. Amanda stayed there, in front of the open door, unable to move. The echo of Jason's footsteps outside stayed in her mind like a reminder of everything she'd lost. The man who'd just walked away was the same one she'd claimed to love for years, who defended her even when she didn't deserve it. And now he was leaving her life like someone closing a book they'd already read, knowing there were no more pages left. She went back inside, sat on the couch still trying to process what had happened, but every memory of the life she built with Jason was now stained by her own betrayal. All the messages were still on her phone. She could have opened them again, reread every line she'd sent. But she didn't. She already knew what she wrote, what she confessed, how she'd ridiculed her own husband without realizing he was the one reading. Regret weighed heavily on her, but it was too late. Jason had left without shouting or shedding a tear in front of her. That lack of reaction hurt more than any fight would have, because it meant he didn't even need her to hate her. He just wanted to move on, like someone who'd already endured enough in silence and refused to give up anything more to resentment. Over the next few weeks, Amanda found herself alone on all sides. The friend who'd encouraged her talks about Mark vanished, ignored her messages, acted like she'd never been involved. At work, people's attitudes changed. There were whispers, rumors, a sudden chill in the hallway. Her social life shrank, as though everything she valued had evaporated. Those nighttime chats were replaced by the sound of her own silence. The lights in the house, once lit for two, now revealed only emptiness. Amanda tried reaching Jason. She wrote long messages, crying as she typed. She apologized, said she regretted it, tried to justify every move with weak excuses. Claimed it was just a mistake, insisted he was still the love of her life, said she'd do anything to get him back. But Jason never replied. Her messages stayed unread. Her email bounced back, and his number was no longer in service. It was as if he'd erased every bridge between them. And she knew why. After everything, Jason chose to forget. He chose peace. He began rebuilding his life at his own pace. He reconnected with old friends who genuinely wanted him happy, friends Amanda had called boring or immature. He started going back to old hangouts, cozy coffee shops, hiking trails near town, little excursions that reminded him of who he'd been before losing his spark. Little by little, his life regained color. And it was around that time he met Brooke. She showed up without effort, without promises or pressure. She was just someone who didn't wear masks or try hard to impress. Brooke didn't dig into his past with endless questions, but she had a way of looking at him that made him feel truly seen. He didn't tell her everything right away, his wounds were still too raw. But she respected his timing. She'd sit with him in quiet moments, laugh at simple things, share light-hearted stories. For the first time in a while, Jason found himself smiling without feeling a weight in his chest. Brooke never tried to compete with a ghost. She didn't try to replace Amanda or become the woman Jason had once imagined. She was simply herself, and that was enough. With her, he realized he no longer had to fear being betrayed because her eyes were honest. Every word came with sincerity. After so long, Jason finally started to smile again. Meanwhile, Amanda found herself sinking into the loneliness she'd created. Her phone, once buzzing with notifications, was now quiet except for automated reminders and collection calls. The house got emptier by the day. The new clothes she'd bought to impress Mark sat in a drawer she refused to open. She avoided her own reflection in the bedroom mirror. Every corner of that house served as a reminder of the choice she'd stubbornly made. She tried going out, meeting new people, pretending to move on, but everything felt empty compared to the life she'd thrown away. The most painful part was realizing that, if she could turn back time, maybe she would have made the same mistake again. Because Amanda hadn't just betrayed Jason, she betrayed herself. The woman who believed she was independent, clever, and irresistible discovered she was fragile, reckless, and unable to hold on to her own happiness. Now she was left with the echo of her decisions. Jason, on the other hand, never looked for revenge. His silence was more powerful than any outburst. He took the hardest path, moving forward peacefully, without letting bitterness poison him. And that was what hurt Amanda most. He didn't need her even to hate her. His indifference said it all, it was over. Because when love ends quietly, it's because it's been gone for a while. All that's left is the emptiness of realizing too late that she lost everything believing she'd never be found out. Thank you for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you won't miss any updates. See you next time.